Within the past few months, the United States has sanctioned Turkey for buying the S-400 missile defence system from Russia. Turkish military equipment has played a decisive role in Azerbaijan's victory over Armenian forces in Nagorno-Karabakh, and Turkish armed drones have been sold to Ukraine, a country that's still in a conflict with Russia. I'm Andrew Hopkins, and I've been speaking one-on-one to the man in charge of Turkey's defence industry, both at home and abroad, Ismail Demir. Ismail Demir, President of Turkey's Defence Industries, thank you very much for talking to TRT World. First of all, I wanted to ask you about the working group that's being set up between Turkey and the United States over the sanctions which have been imposed because of the purchase of the S-400 missile defence system from Russia. What exactly is going to be talked about in this working group?
First, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. This working group offer has been proposed by us for so many times and repeatedly in many occasions. And unfortunately, this call was not answered, and we did not have any positive response. Actually, there was no response, as if they thought that there is no need for that kind of working group. But we insisted that there is, because there is a claim, and then we have to understand what this claim is all about. Because from our perspective, there shouldn't be any problem, because they did not know what measures we have taken in the process. And without knowing this and reaching a conclusion from the other side doesn't make sense. So this is a positive step, and this is just very new news for us. And we'll see the process and the formation of the team and working, because this is just the beginning. And we are glad to hear that there is a positive response from the other side. And we'll do our best to contribute and to explain the situation and to make all the technical teams on the field to give their contribution to make sure that first, at least both sides understood each other very well. Then, if there is any measure to be taken, we would take that measure.
So is it about just keeping the S-400 system separate to the NATO operations, or are you going to talk about things like how to work around the sanctions and issues like that?
We hope that both will be on the table. The first issue is technical more, but the others also should be discussed, because after the announcement of those sanctions, and there are so many circles, confusions about the implementation of those sanctions. And the written text and the language of those sanctions, if it is just implemented in the way that it was presented written, it's not really, it cannot be extended so broad. But some comments or maybe perceptions would make it much more than what it is actually. So in this way, it is better for both sides to discuss this, because as far as we understood, the other side is also not so clear about the extensions of it, because there are some things that parties should abide their law and implement that, but there are parties and sides and institutions who might interpret this much broader than what it actually is. So this is our worry, and it is actually necessary for both sides to discuss that, to make sure that this is not taken out of scale. And actually, if it were taken, then it would be very harmful to the bilateral relations. And as far as we understood right now, neither party is willing to take it out of scale and to make it bigger than what it is today.
What's your view on the sanctions in general? Do you think they're quite harsh or quite mild? Where do you think they sort of lie in that spectrum?
This is something we have been expecting, and so it is actually in parallel to our expectations. And so as it is right now, with the language, it's not so bad, but as I said, How it will be implemented is important, and not only the rules and regulations, but the perception of different parties, their attitude and their approach, and their behavior, their psychology, when they heard about this, might change unless both sides would clarify what it really is, what it should really mean.
Now, some of these sanctions were directed at yourself and 3 other senior defence industry officials. And the way I understand them is that you're restricted now on travel to the United States, and if you have any financial assets there, that these are frozen as well. So do these sanctions actually have any effect on you and your 3 colleagues at all?
Personally, actually, I lived in the US. I got my education in the US. I have friends there. I wish that I could travel, but if it's not going to happen, I don't care much. I wish that it did not happen, but it's not my decision. And financially, I don't have anything to do with it. But of course, it is not nice to have something like this. And in my personal life, it's not going to have any effect. And in our previous discussions, my expectation, or what I have heard from the US side, that it will be applied to me personally, but I really did not expect that it will be applied to 3 of other colleagues of mine. So it was a kind of surprise, and also it is meaningless, because I am leading this institution, this presidency, and I should be, if they want to hold someone responsible, I am the person who will be responsible. But the others are just in the working level of my colleagues, and they just do their job, and and this was kind of strange for me.
I also wanted to ask you about the other aspect of these sanctions, which is the restrictions on export licenses of military equipment, defence equipment from the United States to Turkey. So how much is this going to affect the Turkish defence industry? Because I understand there are some programs where you need American equipment to continue supply chains. You're involved in programs for, I believe, F-16 fighter jets for Pakistan, helicopters for Pakistan. So what kind of effect is it going to have on these programs and your industry as a whole?
Yeah, these sanctions target President of Defense Industries itself. And there is very little that we directly acquire from the US as presidency. And most of our job is to manage the project. We are project manager. So projects have been run by other companies, and since it is targeting us, and it should only affect the limited amount of goods and equipment that we might acquire from the US. And for the other part, it should not be it should not have any effect as it stands right now. So if it remains like this, the effect will be limited. I wish that it will stay that way. And another benefit of having these working groups and dialogue is to make sure that there is no really exaggeration, in a sense. Of course, this effect will be limited. I cannot say that there will be no effect, but this is going to be limited, and we can overcome this. And another effect could be on the export licenses to the 3rd countries of Turkish products. And also, it should not have any meaning, because the exports will be carried out by companies to a 3rd country, and we are not going to be directly involved. So logically, it should not affect that export licenses as well.
So you think that the programs like you have with Pakistan may not be affected too much, that you can handle the change maybe if there is one?
It should not. That's what I mean, the implementation. As it stands, it should not affect. But what is going to be psychology or perception, how the people will understand this, is another issue. And actually, if they implement it to the other way, it is it's not what meant by the sanctions. So a company is exporting something a 3rd country, and this is completely out of our circle directly. So it should not affect logically, and so that's what we expect to see.
What's your view now of why the sanctions came at this particular moment? Because if they turn out to be sort of fairly mild, if you end up talking about various workarounds, how you can sort of still make relations work between the two countries despite the sanctions, also, you know, if the export license issue doesn't have a huge effect, then it doesn't really amount to much in the end, does it? So why do you think the sanctions were imposed now? Do you think there was so much political pressure on the US administration that they had to do something before they left office, or do you view it in a different way?
I cannot say anything like based on certain knowledge, but I can just comment on that because this sanctions issue is on the table for a long time. And what we hear from our friends on the other side is that this is something they should abide with their law and they must do something about it. And also there is a huge pressure from Congress about this. So, and sooner or later they have to do this, and why they chose this particular time, there could be different comments, but it is their decision, I cannot say. But the usual explanation we hear from the other side that this is something that they had to do it. It was not a choice, but it is something that they have to abide with their law.
Now, I understand you were one of the people that signed the actual contract to buy the S-400 missile defense system from Russia. At that time, what was sort of going through your mind? Were you thinking this could create some problems for us? There could be sanctions coming our way from the United States. What were you thinking about that sort of issue?
Indeed, CASA law sanctions was after we have signed S-400. Of course, when we have signed this, there could be some maybe eyebrows raised or some concerns from, let's say, US side, but we always repeatedly said that this is going to be a stand-alone system, and we will take every measures to make sure that this is stand-alone. It's not going to interfere with NATO systems, etc. But CASA law came after we have signed, and from that context, it should not be subjected to CASA sanctions. But on the other hand, the explanation we have taken from the US side was that CASA sanctions use a sentence like significant transaction. So they said that they can interpret this word, significant transaction, any transaction, that any money transfer, any purchase that could be realized under this signature, they can interpret this and they can still apply those CASA. So it is their interpretation, and we cannot say much about this. But if you go by the book, our signature was before CASA law.
So at that time, did you expect problems from the US? Did you factor that into your thinking?
We expected some discussions and worries, but we always thought that this all could be explained and understood, and our needs are on the table. And we had previous discussions with the US side about Patriot systems, and I had myself long discussions and long meetings with the US side about this, and they have known what we have wanted at that time, and they know that they refused many of our requests. So they knew this, and then they knew that after this discussion we have made that choice. So when they knew all this, they can express some concerns, but whether they can go this extent or not, this was something that we did not expect. Actually, we did not have any CASA at that time.
Now, we've already mentioned the F-35 fighter jet program, which Turkey had been removed from, but at the moment you're still making parts for it, and I understand that's going to continue well into next year, at least 2022. So do you see a way back into that program for Turkey on the basis of that, although you've been removed, you're still actively involved in it?
I have always repeatedly said that we are a partner in the program, and this removal is just one-sided, and it is not legal under the MOU that we have signed with the parties. And the removal of one party could only happen if all the other partners voted unanimously. This did not happen. This is a one-sided decision. And we always worked in accordance with the regulations and whatever we agreed on in the program. We have really satisfied all the obligations that we should do in the program. And in many occasions, US side and F-35 program managers even said and confessed that Turkey is a very good partner and their participation in the program has added value, and our company's performance is very good, etc. So, and again, we are considering ourselves that we are still in the program, because whatever taken decision as is one-sided and it's not, doesn't have any legal basis. And we have always kept this line. And in parallel to this, we have asked our companies do not get affected whatever been said in the press, or unless you get an official sign, then the cancellation of order, whatever. This way they have continued. And so that means we have, in the beginning, a point, a line that we have been standing, and we are at the same point again. And we do not leave that line in terms of partnership spirit. And actually, that what it should be for a party who has been honoring a signature and ready to honor again and to continue. And the ball is on the other side. If they want to change their decision, we are here, because we did not change our stand. We are still in the program. We are acting as if we are in the program. Even the payment issue, and they have blocked the way that we do our payments, and you could have continued to do this. So that means a one-sided unilateral steps have been taken. If the other party had chosen to take those steps back, we can still continue.
I wanted to ask you about a few other subjects as well. So let's go on to Ukraine, for instance. At the moment, you're involved in a number of programs with them, producing defense equipment. And last year, you also sold them some armed drones as well. Why is Turkey involved in supplying arms to Ukraine at the moment, at a time when this country, Ukraine, is involved in a conflict with Russia, who you also have a very good relationship with, and who you bought the S-400 missile defense system from?
This is export market, and we are trying to export our products in different countries. And so we are doing this openly. That means when we decided to take those steps and actions, both parties know what we have been doing. And Ukrainians know that we have very good relations with Russia. And not only in S-400 issue, we have many other areas of collaboration. And then we have joint working groups in the field, operations field. And on the other hand, we have, Turkey declared many times that Crimea issue, our views are clear about Crimea. And so we are exporting our product. So this is some world market, and we are exporting our product. And if both parties knew what we have been doing, so it is something clear, and we are trying to make sure that the peace and stability prevails in the region.
I want to ask you about Azerbaijan now. In the middle of last summer, you tweeted when tensions were running high with, in the region in Nagorno-Karabakh. You said that the Turkish defense industry is at the disposal of Azerbaijan. What happened after that? Did you supply more military equipment to Azerbaijan? How did things pan out after you gave this message of support?
This message was a clear support, because there was really injustice there, and there are occupied territories in Azerbaijan for so many years, and there were so many massacres in the 90s, early 90s. So Azerbaijan, our brother country, trying to save their occupied land. So in this conflict, we have to side with the just side, or right side. And that's how our explanation came, and my explanations came. And by this way, actually, Turkish defense industry in general were in disposal of Azerbaijan, and in this process, of course, many Turkish defense industry products has been used. My institution directly is not a party who would export or deal with the trade, but many companies actually work with them, and we have our companies and our people worked very closely with Azerbaijan colleagues, and of course we did our best to make sure that they have successful.
Also, if we can talk about the Turkish defence industry a little bit as well. I understand that it's now more than 70% self-sufficient in terms of providing its own equipment, and now there's an aim of, I think, 100% by 2023. What is the main motivation behind this self-sufficiency? Is it to become like the, I suppose, masters of your own destiny? So you're not in a position where other countries are trying to tell Turkey what to do, and if you don't do what they tell you, they're going to withhold equipment and put sanctions on Turkey. Is this the whole sort of motivation behind this policy?
Actually, this is what it is, as you explained it. And when we said 100%, I mean, to be logical, 100%, I interpret this in strategic components and products. That's because in the global world there are so many systems and things like people trade, and so in this global world, if one claims 100% will be local, etc., yeah, you might try to achieve this, but it can be very costly. So we should go with the optimum. That means in very strategic and necessary components and systems, yeah, we have to be independent. As you rightly said, the main motivation is that you have to have your own destiny. We have seen this many times. This is not a kind of perception or estimation or guess. We have lived this, and we have been still living under these circumstances, and declared or undeclared. We have seen many blockages or slowdown or stoppage of many products, even the simple systems, simple product or simple material, or from different countries, and name so many names, and has not been supplied to us. And what we have done, we have just turned on our local industry and developed and designed and used it. So there's so many warning signs for us that we have to have our own destiny. Otherwise, as we have experienced in the past many times, that if you decide to act independently in the region to try to defend your national interest, and someone will block you if you don't obey, if you don't listen, then they start resorting these sanctions and embargoes and or stoppages, etc. So we have lived this. We have bitter experiences, and those experiences taught us that we have to be independent in order to have our own destiny. Of course, we are always in favor of collaboration and peace-building missions and alliances, etc. And if you look at Turkish history about these, we have always honored our signature. We have always did our obligations in alliances. So this doesn't mean that we have to just be like close down and close our doors and don't get involved with anybody. We never meant this, and we never act in that way.
Ismail Demir, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me talk.